All right, guys, you ready? All right. Howdy, folks. You're listening to Basic Business Advice. This is Chris White, the executive partner at Equus. I'm joined today at GAPCON with a live audience. Good job, guys. Good job. That was not prepared for or planned at all. I'm joined today, though, on the stage by Dan Owolabi, Executive Director at Branches Worldwide, owner of Owolabi Leadership, and all-around really great guy. Dan is a speaker, author, and teacher, and has traveled all over the world working with leaders. I'm real excited to have you on today, Dan. Jordan Stoltzfus, which you guys have gotten to see here at the conference all day long. Jordan is the marketing director for Equus and soon to become CEO of Black Box Consulting, a spinoff of Equus. Jordan has been emceeing all day long for us, and we're looking forward to his contribution to today's podcast. And at the end of the row, Ken Hostetler. Ken is a partner at Equus, as well as former business owner here in Holmes County, and has a lot of insight that we're actually going to come to him first today on the podcast. He's looking so forward to this. So let's get right into it, guys. The question today is this: what if, as the leader, you're the problem? What does it mean that if you, as the leader or manager or head of your team, is the problem? Ken, you have a unique take on this. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. Is this actually an intervention for you, Chris? Is that where we're going with this?
I don't know what you're talking about.
All right. I'm actually a little worried that some of my team members are going to run up here and talk to me about this. So, yeah, it's such a great question. One of the things that I've been thinking about is the fact that we often have this kind of viewpoint, and I had this viewpoint growing up, that in order to be a good manager, I have to know what my employee is doing, right? Like, I have to be able to do their job. I have to step in their shoes. And in some roles, that's true, right? There's a certain point that if you're a supervisor, you may need to be able to step in your employee's shoes and that type of thing. But one of the things that we deal with is we have all of this kind of head trash, or whatever you want to call it, of not being able to manage someone if we're not able to do their job. And in reality, that's really not true. We can be a great manager even if we don't know all the ins and outs of what our employee is doing. So that's one of the things that I want to talk through, get some feedback from you guys on, because for me, that's something that I've had to work through and figure out that, you know what, I can be effective as a manager even if I don't know exactly what my employee's doing.
Ken, that's so interesting because so many of us start off on our own on this journey. We start off going, I have this idea to build this thing, and it's us, or maybe a partner. And there's a reality that there's a time when you have to do it all. There's a reality when you have to know how to answer the phone and take an order and run the lathe and whatever it is that you're doing inside of that. But that mentality creeps into a time where, why does it creep, Ken? I mean, what is your take on why does that creep from the time when you legitimately have to, where you start leading and managing a team and you still think you have to know and be able to do it all?
Yeah, so I think that there's some insecurity with that, right? So we oftentimes struggle with telling other people how to do their job if we feel like we can't do their job, right? And so I think it's growing in confidence, and you know, we often joke on here about sports ball and you know, other sports out there, but the idea is that you can coach and you can be a great coach and be a great leader even if you're not able to do what other people on your team are doing. So I think that's one of the things that you have to do as you grow is, yeah, at the beginning, like you said, when you're starting a business, you have to wear 10 hats and you have to do all these things. But as your business grows, you're going to have to grow beyond that.
Dan, you've worked with a tremendous amount of leaders across the world. Is this universal, or is this something that's unique just to us here?
No, I think it's universal to entrepreneurs, primarily because of what you said. When you start a business, you have to do everything. You have to spin all the plates, you have to cook all the food, you have to wash all the dishes. So you're the one that's getting it done. And then you hire some waitresses and you hire a cook. And here's the linchpin. When you hire those next round of people, the way you gain credibility with those people is the fact that you know what they're supposed to do. When you talk to them, you say, this is how it's done. This is how the meal is made. These are how the dishes are washed. And you gain that level of credibility because of your experience. But the very best leaders are the ones that know how to gain credibility without actually knowing how to do the job that the employees are doing. They're the ones who know how to cast a really clear vision about where we're going. They know the strengths of what the employee has to bring to the table. And then they know specifically what the employee is motivated to do. And they bring all those things together and they say, I'm not going to tell you how to do your job. I'm going to tell you where we need to go and the gaps that we have right now. I'm expecting you to fill it by figuring it out. And you're going to get better every day, and we're going to leave room for making mistakes, but I'm not going to micromanage you because I don't 100% know exactly how you're supposed to do the job, because that's why we hired you, to do that job. And so the very best leaders are the ones that recognize how to motivate people without actually having to know their job.
So I'm going to come back to you with a similar question I just asked Ken. How do you get there? What is preventing you, preventing leaders from flipping that switch to, I am getting credibility because I know how to make this widget, and I can show this person how to make this widget, to I am getting credibility because I see this need that this person can fill and I can't, but I can still get them deployed there. How do you flip that switch?
Yeah, the best way that I've seen to flip that switch is growth. I think oftentimes when an entrepreneur can touch all the walls, they can touch every role, they really kind of can see what everyone is doing, then you can keep your fingers in everything. You know how to do everything. But if you grow to the size, and Brian Miller was talking earlier, when you grow to the size of Provia, right, you don't know what everybody is doing, but you have to have mechanisms in place to understand what everyone is reaching for. And you have to know when people are doing a good job and when they're not. You have to have metrics that are really clear. And so ultimately, growth really forces you to get to a place where you can't know what everyone is doing. And if you want to grow as an entrepreneur, you've got to flip the script and get to that place. And there's ways to do that, and there's all kinds of different formulas. If you don't want to grow, and you want to stay at the same level because you're insecure and you don't want to give people the freedom to actually make mistakes and fail and try and grow and learn, well, then you're going to stay, 5 people in your business or 7 people in your business or however many people in your business you can manage by just being you as the sole manager.
Jordan, you're getting ready to launch a brand new endeavor as part of, our larger umbrella of organizations. Where is your mind go when you're going to be right now starting, as Dan said, touching all the walls of this? Where does your mind go about this?
Good question. Didn't prep that before the session. It's one of those things, and even growing in the role here as marketing director at Equus, I like to get my hands into everything to start, right? Learn how to do everything on a surface level, whether that's graphic design, whether that's web design, whether that's video editing. And then once you figure out that, you kind of figure out what you're good at and what you're not good at, and then figure out what to delegate from there. And I think over the last couple of years, that's one thing I've realized. That's why we have Tyler Needing here helping us out with all the tech stuff. I'm not good at that. He's a very talented videographer and with tech and AV and all that. He does so much better than I ever could. Figured out how to delegate that out. Becca Hill, who's sitting back there, does our market research project management. I'm not very detail-oriented. She is. So figuring out where you can bring people in where you're not strong. And I think to learn how to do that, you need to kind of get your hands into everything first to figure out what you're good at, what you're not good at.
So let's go back to the core question. What do you do when you realize that you are the problem as the leader?
Well, I think a bigger question, and we'll get to that for sure, but I think a bigger question is, how do you know that it's you that's the problem? Like, when do you get to the place where you realize the reason why our company isn't growing, or the reason why other people are growing faster than us, or the reason why we have so much turnover isn't because I have a bunch of dumb employees or people don't get what I'm doing. It's actually me. Like, at what point do you stop and say, oh, wow, I'm the issue?
Is an employee going to come tell you that? Probably not. I mean, we have employees and employers here. Are you going to go tell your boss tomorrow, hey, they talked about this at GAPCON, you're kind of a problem? Like, that's probably not going to happen. If you do, good luck. I would love to hear how that goes afterwards.
But isn't that scary, though? Because you could be the problem, and you walk into your staff meeting, and you're just staying up all night trying to figure out what's going on. You walk into your staff meeting, everyone in the room knows that you are the problem except for you, and no one has the courage to tell you. Right? People will watch you. This is crazy. People will watch you make plans and walk off a cliff, right? Everybody in the room knows it's a bad plan. It's not going to work. You're not going to execute it well. No one on the team is ready, but no one has the courage to tell you, and they'll watch you tank the whole company before they actually say, hey, maybe that's not a good idea, right? I mean, that's a scary place to be.
Ken, you're in a unique position. You've co-owned a company. You're now, an employee, partner at a company. From your perspective, how would you want somebody to have talked to you as an owner, or vice versa, you to talk to somebody in ownership about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, I mean, how dare they, right? I mean, nobody wants to hear that. But yeah, I mean, I think we all hope that someone would speak truth into our life, right? Like, we all want that person to come forward and say. On the other hand, we've also, we've all been in situations where someone comes and says, hey, I have this great idea, and, I think you just need to get out of the way. And you realize that they probably don't see the big picture. So how do you balance that? How do you figure out, well, when am I self-aware enough to know that I'm the problem? And when is it someone else that really isn't seeing the whole picture?
I want to take a moment because I think you guys are describing something that has a dark side to it. We want to say, entrepreneurs can never be wrong, obviously, right? We are never wrong about anything, and it's really hard to find people to confront us. There is a dark side to this conversation. There is the imposter syndrome that an entrepreneur or leader will go through, that everything is my fault, and I'm not capable enough to do this. And someday somebody's going to pull back the door, and they're going to look in there, and they're going to realize he doesn't know what he's doing. And that syndrome that drives us, that is a dark side, that is equally as much of a problem because it is holding us back from doing that. And I want to acknowledge that because I think sometimes if we go, well, you're the problem, somebody who struggles with an imposter syndrome goes, yeah, I know. I've been telling you that all along. I knew I was the problem. There's a dark side to that is equally as toxic as blindness to the ability to make solid, good decisions for our businesses. And I'd call that out. You guys want to comment on that at all?
Yeah, and I think this might sound self-serving, but I think that's really where the value of a good coach comes in. Because I think what you need is a third party to step in and say, no, you're not being insecure. This is just always challenging for every entrepreneur at this stage. Or, no, you need to actually handle this. Don't ask your team what to do. This is the decision that only you can make. I think you have to have a third party in your life who can speak that truth. And if you don't hire a coach, at the very least, be part of a cohort or have a group of friends or something where they can look in the eye and tell you the truth and say, I think you're being an idiot. Every entrepreneur needs that. Every leader needs that. If you don't, then again, you're surrounding yourself with people who don't have the courage to tell you the truth. And when that happens, you become the emperor with no clothes, right? You walk into your kingdom and you look like a complete idiot, and there's no one in the entire kingdom that will tell you, hey, you're making big mistakes.
Yeah, I think it's, this is one of those kind of paradoxes of the more confidence you have, and I understand what you're saying of the imposter syndrome, but the more you can have someone speak into your life, gain confidence, the easier it is to hear other people's critique, right? The less confidence we have, the harder it is to hear other people say, you're not doing a great job, right?
Because you already have that feedback loop in your head, and you're like, now everybody knows that I'm an idiot, And now they're saying it out loud, and it becomes really hard.
So we've addressed that. I wanted to make sure that was called out because I think that is a real struggle that we will go through because sometimes we realize we get into this journey of business ownership or team leadership and we realize we were woefully under-equipped and we're just waiting for somebody to call it out. And I think that needs to be acknowledged. But I want to get back to the question of either how do you figure it out or what do you do when you figure it out that all of a sudden I'm the person that's preventing us from accomplishing what we need to do, from getting to where we need to go. And Dan, you said a little bit about that's growth. You need to grow into that. You need to grow into that understanding. But my question is, what do you do? When you get to that point and that realization, what do you do next?
Well, I think for me, one of the things that I see sometimes even in myself is when I recognize that I'm not good at something, I have one of two options. I can either try to throw it to someone else and support them and be a cheerleader for them, or I can throw it to someone else or have someone else help me and end up not giving them the resources to be successful. I think it's that balance, right? So if you have a situation where you say, hey, this person is much better at this, Jordan, with your team, it's great that you figured out that Tyler and Becca are better at other things, but they still need you for resources, right? And so I think that's one of the dangers is sometimes it's like, well, we figure out we're not good at something. Okay, well, I'm done with this. I'm just stepping aside. I'm not doing anything with it.
I think, to add to what Ken's saying, I think that's really good. I think to add to what Ken's saying, one of the best ways to do that if you want to build a strong team culture is to admit that you are the problem. I think you only have, in the course of a year, I think you only have maybe 3 times that you can do this before you really start to lose influence. But when you recognize that what you're doing is causing your team pain, more trouble, you just didn't see it coming and now they're paying the price for it or whatever, just stepping in and saying, hey guys, I just recognize that this is a me thing. And the reason why you're experiencing XYZ is because I am doing or not doing ABC. And when you just say it out loud, your team is not going to be surprised. Like, oh my gosh, it's you? They actually know already that it's you. And they're going to be relieved that now you know that it's you. And we can all sort of get this on the table and move on. But again, you can only do that so many times in a calendar year. And the reason is, if you do that every week, then you start to lose influence. When you say, I don't know what I'm doing every week, then people are like, well, then if you don't know what you're doing, I'm going to go work for someone who does know what they're doing. So there has to be a balance there. But there are moments when you recognize that you are an acute problem. It is me, and it's around this one thing. And I haven't said this in 4 months. Okay, I'm going to do it again. And I'm going to let people know, hey, this was a problem that I'm trying to fix.
Bruce is in here someplace. He said something to me in the middle of 2020 that there was a lot of us in this room that maybe there was some moments there when we weren't sure about what was going to be next for us. And that was a fairly universal sentiment for a lot of business owners at that time. And Bruce Hampshire said something to me that I have repeated over and over again to myself and to others who have encountered this moment like you're talking about. I have every right not to know where we're going. I have no right to be unclear. And that was one of the most profound statements about that is I have every right to be wrong as a leader, to even be the problem from time to time that I'm actually holding things back. What I love about what you said is this: I have no right to not be clear about that. Now, not maybe weekly, but at the right time is I have to communicate with clarity what is going on consistently. Even if that clarity is, I'm not sure what's next. Or I've identified that this is holding me back and this is holding us back, and I want to address that as a group. So
that last part I think is really important. When you say, I don't know what's wrong, or you say, I don't know what's happening, or I'm the problem, the second phrase after that is, and here's what we're going to do to try to figure it out. Like, that phrase is really important. You're not just leaving it hang. You're saying, and here's the plan to try to get to the end of it. We might never figure it out, but here's what we're going to try to do. And then you set a course and you go.
So I have seen, and some of our entrepreneurs will know the feeling out there, is that when we encounter those moments where it gets really hard, and we don't have the answer, and we understand that maybe it's some flaw that we're bringing to the team that we haven't addressed, there can be a temptation to just leave. The idea that maybe if I just take this coat off and hang it up, I can go do something else at this time. Have you guys ever encountered that in working with other leaders in your entrepreneurial journey, that sometimes when it gets hard, even if it's our fault for it being hard, the desire is just, I'm going to hang this up and walk over here and do something else?
What's the difference between leaving and getting out of the way?
Oh, that's a really good question. I would say, and we can address both, leaving is, I'm not going to do this thing anymore. I'm not going to do this business. I'm going to go do something else. Where getting out of the way, maybe there's somebody else inside my business who can do this better than I can. So I like that distinguishment. I'd like to focus on the first one, though. The idea that it's easier to leave this than fix it.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely felt that. Like, I've struggled with that in my own life of, when there's difficult situations, just even outside of work. Sometimes it feels like it's easier to do something else than to keep walking through it. And I love your question, Jordan, because it is a question of when do you keep going and when do you say, you know what, it is time to do something else.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. The way that I find comfort in that is recognizing that almost every president or every professor or every parent has gotten to that place where they're like, I am facing problems today that I don't know how to fix. I've used every tool in my toolbox. I've talked to everybody that I know. The problem isn't going away and it's getting worse every day. I wake up in the morning and I feel scared. Like, I've talked to so many people that have gotten to that place. And what's comforting for me is that when you keep going, even when you don't see a way forward, and you believe that you'll figure it out after a while, you believe that if I just keep digging, keep looking, keep asking, something is going to become clear. When you do that enough times, you recognize, okay, I can get to a place where I really don't know what to do next, but if I keep pushing long enough, something will come. God will show up, things will come together, you'll find solutions. And I think that's really what makes the difference between good leaders and bad leaders. Like, good leaders recognize if they keep working with their people, they keep pushing, they'll get to another level. Bad leaders, either they quit verbally and say, hey, I'm done, I'm walking away, or they quit inside and they just sort of put it in cruise control and they don't tell anybody, right? That's the difference between good and bad leaders.
So I'm curious here. We're talking a lot in concepts and theories. Do any of you guys have practical stories, examples of like, hey, this is a time when I got out of the way, or this is a time when I did not get out of the way, and here's what blew up on me? Is there any like practical stuff we can throw out there for the crowd?
I've never made a mistake in my entire professional career.
That's not true. I just heard you give a speech and you made mistakes all over the place.
Wait, you were actually listening? Come on.
Touche.
These guys, I'll be honest, there were a number of times in the last 2 years when I took full ownership of the firm and Tom sold me the entire firm, that it was so hard that I could not imagine staying at the firm. It literally had gotten so challenging that I was in such a survival mindset that we're just going to survive this. We're going to survive what's next. That my creativity was shutting down, my ability to problem solve was shutting down, and the only reality that was becoming consistent was that I've done about everything I can do here and it's time for me to go. And that's a reality, I think, of the trauma of what was happening. That was an external impact to business that was not brought on by internal factors at businesses. I think it highlighted problems that had been internal and maybe even exacerbated them a little bit and made it like, oh, wow, this is a big problem. And now that there's no success outside for us to focus on, we've got to focus on this stuff. But I'll be honest, there was an extended period of time that my ability to imagine the success of the firm was shut off because of the stress and the strain. And the only solution that I was able to come to was, you've done what you could do here, and it's time for you to go. Now, I didn't leave, thankfully, and was stuck it out. Part of that's because I'm too stubborn to stop. The other part of it is there was probably some spark of hope that we would make it through this, and the amazing team of people I've got around me, who, quite honestly, probably wouldn't have let me quit had I tried to hang it up and just walk away from it. But that's real. There are times when the strain of building and moving these things forward, you endure it for so long that mentally you just start to shut down.
Yeah, so one of the things that I was thinking about when you asked that question, Jordan, was in 2011, I realized that I myself felt like a problem in the business I owned with a partner. And, you know, it was that decision of, do I continue to slog through it? Do I continue to fight? Do I continue to try to be a part of this? Or is it time to pivot and do something else? And that was a hard decision. And ultimately, you know, stepping away from that absolutely felt like the right decision years later. But going from that to spending years in school where I felt like very little direction, didn't know what the end result was going to be, it was really hard. And so it's sometimes it's better to walk away, and sometimes it's better to keep pushing and figuring it out. Like you said, Chris, we're all better because you were able to keep walking through that, and sometimes it's just hard to know in the moment.
Well, to be fair, Ken also didn't listen to me when he asked me if he should go to law school, and I said no, but if you do, come work for me. So, Dan, what do you got? Anything on this?
Yeah, I mean, I've got so many stories of that. I mean, I'm just listening to what you guys are saying, and it's bringing back a lot of memories. I think one good example is launching branches worldwide. When Brian came and said, "Hey, I've got an idea. I'd love for you to join me," it was, "Hey, we want to, create an organization that works with 30 leaders in 30 countries for 30 years." At that time, I'd only been to like 2 countries at all, and so I love big ideas. Believe in Brian, was inspired that he believed that we could do it together, and so got on board with it. And then I was sitting I'd already left my job as a pastor to do this, and I'm sitting in my room thinking, wow, what? Like, how am I even, where do you start? Like, how do you even do this? And I think there was a lot of months of just pain and self-doubt and frustration and wrong steps and right steps, and eventually you hire the right people and you gain some momentum, but ultimately you start to figure out that there really is no silver bullet when it comes to building a successful global organization. It is just hard work every day, and you have to figure out whether you like that work or not, or whether you're okay with ambiguity or not, or whether you're fine with making mistakes or not. And I think every time a difficult moment came up, I told myself, this is worth it. What we're doing makes a huge difference. And I am learning and getting better every step of the way. Even when I make mistakes, it is okay because I'm learning and growing. And so that was a big help for me. And now, 17 countries represented. We've got amazing employees. Cody Carpenter's here, and he's a huge part of the reason why we have the success we have. But, ultimately, it really comes down to that push and that slog and that belief that even if it's difficult, you can still make it happen.
So common thread I'm hearing, anytime you get into business or pursue something that you care about, going to school, starting a business, there's this journey, right? This entrepreneur's roller coaster that has these highs and these lows. So taking your example, Chris, taking over the firm, going through some valleys, and then now we're sitting here at GAPCON, I would say this is a high. And even for myself, I have a little less experience than some of these guys up here, but personally,
Calling us old. Is that where this is going?
I just said there's a lot of wisdom to be gleaned around me. I'll just say that, yeah. Personal example for me, a couple years ago, me and my family purchased an 8-acre farm and turned it into a wedding venue. And it was clear to us, we saw this vision, hey, this is what this can be. And people came in and looked at it like, are you sure? Like, does this seem like a good idea, wedding venue in Holmes County, Ohio? I don't know. But it was so clear, and part of it maybe because I had just gotten married a few months prior and whatever. It was all clear for me. But, through this, you're going through these moments, okay, we're not booking enough weddings. Are we sure this is going to work? All these like emotions that you're fighting through. But the thing that's kept it going, 2 things for me. One, I love working alongside my family. My parents are actually sitting here right there in the crowd. Love working alongside of them, so that makes it worth it.
And they're shaking their head like, we do not like working with Jordan. We do not agree. He is not fun.
Yeah, we're going to have a meeting afterwards. I'll probably get kicked out. Anyway.
Are they still here?
Maybe. But the second thing that's really cool is seeing the brides, especially on a wedding day, is awesome. So,
dude, you're married. That's awkward. And your wife is
not
probably
here.
listening now.
Yeah.
She's not here right now.
You should take that back right now.
I'll show Becky the recording
Yep.
and my 6-week-old
No,
daughter.
I'm gonna
Taylor.
send it to her, too.
Relax. Can I finish what I'm saying?
Go
All right.
We are not divorce lawyers. Come on. I mean, we have some, but
Tyler, can we edit this out? The last 5 minutes, we'll edit this out. But no, so when the wedding starts, stress is high, tension is high. If you've ever gone through a wedding day, you guys know this, right? And people are kind of edgy, and it's a stressful situation. And then you see it afterwards, and everybody's so thankful, like the most grateful people there. Hey, this was awesome. And it's those moments when you're at the top of that mountain that kind of makes it all worth it, right? So all the things that everyone here is saying, roller coaster, embrace the highs, don't let the lows get you down. And when they do, find people alongside you that can help you get through it.
Oh, man. Maybe he should lead these from now on.
That's probably all I got now. I'm probably sit here quiet for the rest of the
I
day.
think he's going to kick the rest of us off, so
That's,
I'm okay with that.
apparently we're too old. So the reality of it is, from what we're hearing here, as leaders, now whether that's the owner of a business or you're leading a sales team or you're leading a global organization, the reality of it is, sounds like we're going to be wrong. We're going to be the problem sometimes. That it's going to be us.
Can we say most of the time?
Well, I don't, some of us more than others, maybe. But the reality of it is if we're willing to acknowledge that, we can move forward into solving it.
Yeah, there's a great phrase that Seth Godin uses where he talks about fear, and he says fear is a lot like marathon runners when they're running. When they run, they know ultimately during the marathon they're going to get tired. They know that. Like at some point they're going to get tired, and they plan for it. They recognize it's important to get water along the way, that kind of stuff. And he says for entrepreneurs and leaders, fear is going to creep in. It's going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to look dumb. Plan on it. It's part of the thing. And when you plan on it by having a support system around you, or you have things that you say, or scripture that you read, or places that you go, or whatever, when you have that sort of ready, then it makes the lows not nearly as low because you're ready for it. You're not surprised by it. I think it's the surprise of making mistakes that often gets people. I didn't realize it was going to be this hard. I didn't know that I wouldn't have funding. I didn't know that my family wouldn't agree. I didn't know that, all those things you are surprised by, and then it makes the challenges even more challenging.
When you said marathon, I thought you were going to tell us about the time you ran a marathon.
I ran it with Ken, actually. It was amazing.
True story. Not amazing for me, but you rocked it, man.
So if we can be honest about these endeavors, we set ourselves up to catch it earlier. Because the struggle becomes not failing, not being wrong. It's perpetuating that. It's creating a culture, Dan, I love what you said, that the culture is so afraid to tell us we're wrong that it lets us walk off the cliff. And if we can be honest that just failing, as I just said, is just part of the journey, then we can acknowledge and move past it faster. We can get on it. And I love it because Kevin had the slide up in here where he was talking about the journey and how you're moving like this through it, back and forth across those lines, that success line. Sometimes it's excessively successful. Sometimes it's really not at all. And those can be failures. They can be market influences. It can be a number of things. But acknowledging them and moving with them sooner than later is probably the essential to success and the solution to us being the problem. So guys, anything to finish up this? Any other ideas? Anything you want to toss out on this topic?
Yeah, well, I want to flip it a little bit. We've been talking about what if you're the owner who's in the way or you're the leader who's in the way. Can we flip it and say, what if you're an employee who has an owner or a leader who doesn't get out of the way? What do you say to them?
Should I walk off this? Should I leave right now?
I think this is you and I, Jordan.
I just teed it up for you, Ken. This is all you.
Oh, wait, let me get my list. Hang on.
No, that's a great question, Jordan. I mean, the reality of it is all of us have probably worked for somebody at some point in time that has been the emperor with no clothes. Either through ignorance or openly just defying, pride is just not letting them. The question is how do you lead up? And I think you're saying you have to care enough about this thing to want to. And I think let's set the stage that you as an employee have to care enough about this person, this organization, this business to want to lead up into change. But how do you do it?
I think there's definitely there's tactical things you can do once you get into the conversation that make it easier, right? The things you say, phrases you use, there's all kinds of ways to do that. But I think if you're looking for bold principles that help, two things really help going into that conversation. Having mutual respect and having a mutual purpose. If you actually respect your boss, and they know that you respect them and they respect you, then that's a major win, right? Number one. And number two, if you know what your boss is after, you know what they're trying to accomplish, you're not guessing, you actually know they want to get to here and they've said it already and you know that, and you also want to get to the same place, then those are two things that you have in your back pocket that, look, you can't fail in that conversation because they respect you and you're after the same thing. And then you're able to say things like, hey, John, I've been thinking the other night, do you want to know an idea that I have on how we can actually hit our revenue goals this next year? Something I've just observed, just an idea that I might throw to you. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. And then you suggest the thing that maybe is causing it, which is him, right? That's always a hard thing to do. But at the very least, you're aiming for the same thing, and he knows that you respect him. And so that's a good way to start the conversation.
Yeah, I would add to that I think having a plan, right? So one of the things that we're used to as managers is people coming with problems, right? So if you're able to say, hey, here's the problem, and maybe not pin it on the manager, say, hey, this is what we're dealing with. Here's a plan on how we can get there, can be a better approach than just, someone coming and saying, well, let me tell you the 10 things you're doing wrong, right? So that absolutely, I think how you approach it and what your delivery is going to make a big difference as well.
Jordan, I'll share from somebody who now I have 30 people working for me in one business and 10 in another. I have been the recipient of positive upward leadership. Because the intellectual honesty is, I have been the problem sometimes. And it hasn't always been easy. Not now, Dan, sometimes. But I have been the recipient of positive upward leadership. And it started when I started building the team and having the kind of relationships that you guys are talking about, respect, understandings of, kind of a plan and a thought process, and we're on the same page and we're moving in the same direction, which is, again, I will keep calling out Brian, but I love the fact that Provia, he put up their goals and their flywheel and the values. Everybody agrees this is what we're trying to do. And so I've been the recipient of it, and the way it was framed to me was, Chris, you've got to get it out of your head. Because the biggest problem I was having was that all the way back to the entrepreneurial problem of touching all the walls. And I kept trying to do that. Even when we were getting too big for me to do it, I kept trying to touch all the walls. And the positive upward leadership that I received was, we need to get this out of your head. They didn't frame it in the negative of, Chris, you're the problem, get out of the way. They kept framing it in, we need more from what's going on up here so that you can get, and what the end result of it was, oh, I'm not doing that great of a job at that, and this person does a better job. It was not a quick process, but I was a recipient of that positive upward leadership in areas where I was probably holding us back.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I mean, when you have your goals, your values, your objectives all sort of written out so everyone can see it and it's not in your head, suddenly there's another level of accountability. You're hanging on to something that you're doing in the organization, not because it's helpful for the organization, but because you like doing it. And people can actually say, hey, look, if we really want to get to point A, you've got to let go of that. And that kind of objectivity only happens when you put your goals sort of out there in front of everyone, and when you have your values really clear and you have your roadmap really clear, then everyone can say, oh, well, this is the best route. And that means that you have to get out of that seat.
Well, guys, thank you. We were up against our time. This was a great conversation. Folks, thanks for listening in with us on this one. Really appreciate the audience at GAPCON today being a part of this conversation with us. We hope it was helpful to you, and be happy to talk about any of this stuff with you guys more in depth. So on behalf of Dan Olabi, Jordan Stoltzfus, and Ken Hostetler, this is Chris White, and we appreciate you guys being a part of the Basic Business Advice Podcast. Thanks.